Homily for the 30th Sunday of the year B. Do not pass me by, Son of David. Our readings for this Sunday are taken from Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 7 to 9, Hebrews chapter 5, verse 1 to 6, and the Gospel of St. Mark chapter 10, verse 46 to 52. In the first reading, Jeremiah prophesies about the salvation of the people of Israel, when God will gather them from their places. Those who would be returning home with great rejoicing will include the blind, the lame, and other weak and vulnerable persons. In the second reading from the letter to the Hebrews, Jesus is described as a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. The gospel passage is the story of Bartimaeus, the blind beggar, who confidently called out to Jesus while he was passing by and captured Jesus' attention. He was cured of his blindness, and he promptly followed Jesus. The good news of Prophet Jeremiah. Jeremiah was constantly warning the people about the tragedy that would befall them. But at a time of acute distress and discouragement in Israel, Jeremiah focused his attention on the God who will intervene to save his people, a God who is a father to his people. The focus of Jeremiah this time was not the sins of the people, but on the merciful God and the glorious time when God will ensure that the exiles come back rejoicing from the far ends of the earth where they had been scattered. The joyous crowd of returnees will include the most vulnerable of the people, the blind, the lame, the pregnant women, the women in labor. These are the vulnerable persons, often forgotten in times of crisis. But when God intervenes to free his people, they will be the ones leading the procession back home. Bartimaeus, the blind beggar. The prophecy of Jeremiah finds fulfillment in the healing of Bartimaeus, the blind beggar. As a blind beggar, he was the poorest of the poor. He dwelt in darkness. He saw nothing, and hardly anyone took notice of him. He dwelt on the side of the road, on the margins of society, and lived a wretched life. The name Bartimaeus simply means the son of Timaeus, meaning that many did not care to know his own real name. While going to Jerusalem, Jesus passes along the way by Jericho. Bartimaeus hears some noise, and on realizing that it was Jesus of Nazareth passing by, he cries his heart out and lets out his groan of anguish. He says, "Son of David, don't pass me by, have mercy on me." The respectable people in the crowd tried to stop him. They resented his nuisance value and told him to keep quiet. But Bartimaeus shouted all the louder, "Son of David, don't pass me by, have mercy on me." Jesus took notice of the man and asked them to call him. And this changed the entire story. Bartimaeus' prayer of lamentation had been heard. Jesus is the true lover who suffers profoundly when he sees one of his beloved ones in pain. To Jesus' question, "What do you want me to do for you?" Bartimaeus replies, "Master, let me see again." Jesus heals him and commends his faith, saying, "Go, your faith has saved you." But Bartimaeus responds to his healing by following Jesus along the way to Jerusalem. He becomes a disciple of Jesus. The prayer of Bartimaeus expresses both pain and faith. He believed in a God who pays attention, a God who has compassion, a God who hears prayers, and a God who heals the brokenhearted. He did not waste his time on such philosophical questions as, why is there so much suffering? Why me? Amid intense suffering, those philosophical questions do not help. Such questions neither heal people nor take away their pains. Bartimaeus did not resign passively to his fate, something that is known as fatalism. He did not adopt the defeatist position that God has abandoned him. Instead, he shouted out his misery and screamed out his pain because he believed that God is both good and powerful. He focused his attention on Jesus alone, ignoring the many distractions around. In Bartimaeus' prayer for help, we recognize his confession of faith in Jesus and what Jesus can do. He identified Jesus as the promised Messiah, the one who would exercise his ministry through acts of mercy and compassion. See Isaiah chapter 61 and Luke chapter 4 verse 18 to 19. Bartimaeus as a model of discipleship. When summoned by Jesus, Bartimaeus throws off his tattered clothes, the last vestige of human pride and respectability he had. He presents himself to Jesus in his nakedness and littleness, in his emptiness and nothingness, and in his poverty and wretchedness. This is the disposition within which context God can act in each one of us. When we go to God with our tattered clothes and insist on holding on to them, we make God unable to do much with us. As a reward for his exemplary faith and trust, he receives his sight and much more. He becomes a disciple, a model disciple. Bartimaeus challenges us today to humbly recognize our own wretched state and to acknowledge the presence of God in our midst. He challenges us to trust in the goodness and mercy of God, to pray, to shout, and to scream out our need to him, to be healed of our blindness, and to follow him along the way. Physical blindness and spiritual insight. Physical blindness is a terrible thing, but there is something worse than physical blindness. It is spiritual blindness. There is a difference between sight and insight. A blind person could have insight, more insight than a sighted person. Bartimaeus had no sight, but he sure had insight. A lack of faith results in more serious darkness than physical blindness. This is the point of the story of Bartimaeus. Jesus accused his followers of having eyes but failing to see. Mark 8:18. Bartimaeus, the blind beggar, could see better than many followers of Jesus at the time. While many of the followers of Jesus nursed a lot of doubt, Bartimaeus demonstrated strong faith in him. Many saw all that Jesus had done and yet had great difficulty believing. But Bartimaeus had not seen and yet believed. Many were unwilling to go with Jesus along the way to Jerusalem, but Bartimaeus was willing to go the whole way with Jesus. Thus, many of the followers of Jesus were afflicted by spiritual blindness. Some of them were so preoccupied with the wonder-worker image of Christ that they remained blind to the deeper truths proclaimed by him through the miracles. Jesus is the light of the world. Jesus has come to heal us of the darkness of doubt and despair, the darkness of hatred and lovelessness, the darkness of ignorance and disbelief, the darkness of wickedness and unforgiveness, and the darkness of sin and death. Jesus came not only to open our physical eyes, he came with a new vision, opening people's minds, consciences, hearts, imaginations, and spirits. The greatest calamity that can befall a people is not only that they should be born blind, but that they should have eyes and fail to see. Jesus came to open our eyes that we may see God as our Father and recognize our neighbors as brothers and sisters. He came that we may see that greed and avarice are a cancer that eats its own host to death. He came to help us see that aggressive competition for power, wealth, and status only leads to sadness, violence, death, and destruction. Jesus came to open our eyes that we may see that our endless but inordinate preoccupation with acquiring power, wealth, and prestige positions amounts to vanity upon vanities. He came that we may see clearly the one thing that is truly important, that is, to spend our lives in loving service of God and neighbor. God bless you.